Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. Chapter 1. Midnight Encounter. The early January moonlight bathed the night-blooming jasmine as Lila Moon adjusted her camera lens. As a botanical photographer specializing in nocturnal flora, she had wandered past the public botanical garden's boundaries without realizing she'd trespassed onto the private estate of one of the city's most enigmatic figures. "Those are Epiphyllum oxypetalum," a deep voice said from the darkness. "Queen of the night. They bloom for a single night each year." Lila gasped, nearly dropping her camera as she spun around. Standing before her was a tall figure with a chiseled jawline, penetrating blue eyes, and dark hair streaked with silver. "Mr. Hart," she breathed, "I'm so sorry. I thought this was still part of the public gardens." Julian's eyes focused on the camera in her hands. "You're photographing them?" There was curiosity in his voice rather than anger. "Yes," Lila said. "I'm a botanical photographer specializing in night-blooming species." She expected him to escort her to the gates. Instead, he stepped closer. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her camera. His fingers brushed against hers as he took it, an unexpected current surging between them. His hands weren't soft but strong, with calluses that suggested he worked with plants himself. "You have a gift," he said, returning the camera. "You see what others miss, the beauty that only reveals itself in darkness," Lila replied. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, recognition perhaps. "You're trespassing on my property, Miss Moon." Lila Moon, Miss Moon. "But I find I don't mind, not when the trespasser sees my flowers the way you do. Would you like to see more?" he asked suddenly. "I have species from 6 continents, many of which only reveal themselves at night, like stars," Lila said. "Most people never see them, stars, because they're asleep when the real show begins." Julian's expression softened. He seemed to really look at her, not just as an intruder, but as someone who might understand his obsession. "Follow me," he said. As they walked the moonlit path, he asked, "How did you become interested in night-blooming species?" "After my 3rd heartbreak, I couldn't sleep. I'd wander the botanical gardens at night. That's when I noticed flowers that only showed their true selves when everyone else was asleep. And you, what drew you to collect flowers that no one sees? Perhaps the same thing. Some beauty isn't meant for everyone." They reached a magnificent greenhouse gleaming in the moonlight. "This is my sanctuary," Julian said, unlocking the door. "Few people have seen what's inside." As they entered, their hands accidentally brushed again. The air between them charged. Inside, hundreds of night-blooming species were illuminated. Cereus, jasmine, evening primrose. The fragrance was intoxicating. "It's paradise," she whispered. 28 years of collecting," he said quietly. "I've had more consistent luck with plants than with people." He gestured toward a particularly striking bloom, Cereus grandiflorus, the queen of them all. "May I photograph her?" Lila asked. "On one condition," he said, his voice lower. "You share what you see with me. I want to see them through your eyes." For the next hour, they moved through the greenhouse together, occasionally brushing against each other, each contact sending electricity through her. "You haven't asked why a man collects flowers that bloom only when he's asleep," Julian said. Lila lowered her camera. "I assumed it was for the same reason I photographed them. Some beauty exists whether it's witnessed or not." The look he gave her was intense. "Exactly." Something shifted between them, recognition of a kindred spirit who understood finding beauty in darkness. "It's late," Lila said reluctantly. "I should go. I'll drive you home," Julian offered. When they reached her apartment, he walked her to her door. "Thank you for not calling security on me," she said. Julian smiled, transforming his serious face into something breathtaking. "Thank you for trespassing." He gave her his card with a handwritten note on the back, "For the woman who sees beauty in darkness. Tomorrow night, 9:00 p.m. As Lila ran her finger over the words, she realized that for the first time in years, she was looking forward to tomorrow with something more than professional interest. What she couldn't know was that Julian Hart had his own reasons for collecting flowers that bloomed in darkness. Reasons tied to 28 years of heartbreak and longing. Chapter 2. Blooming in Darkness. The following evening, Lila found herself standing before her closet, discarding outfit after outfit with growing frustration. She'd never been this indecisive about clothing, especially for a professional engagement. But Julian Hart wasn't just any client. and the memory of his intense gaze made her hands tremble slightly. As she finally settled on a flowing sapphire dress that complemented her warm olive skin, "It's just photography," she told her reflection, though the flutter in her stomach suggested otherwise. At precisely 8:45 p.m., she pulled up to the imposing gates of the Hart estate. They swung open before she could announce herself, making her wonder if she was being watched. The driveway curved through manicured grounds, ending at a stunning modernist mansion of glass and steel. Julian stood waiting on the steps, his tall figure silhouetted against the warm light spilling from inside. "You came," he said simply as she approached. "You invited me," Lila replied, matching his tone. Julian had exchanged his casual attire from the previous night for a crisp black shirt with rolled sleeves that revealed strong forearms. The sight was unexpectedly intimate, like glimpsing a carefully guarded man in a private moment. "I have something special to show you tonight," he said, offering his arm in an old-fashioned gesture that somehow seemed natural coming from him. Lila placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, immediately aware of the firm muscle beneath the fine fabric. "Another rare flower?" "The rarest," he confirmed, leading her not toward the greenhouse she'd seen the night before, but along a winding path that led deeper into the grounds. "One that blooms once a decade, and only for a single night. It began opening an hour ago." Their path was illuminated by subtle landscape lighting that cast a silvery glow on the exotic plants surrounding them. Each step brought them closer together, their bodies occasionally brushing in the narrow spaces between towering tropical plants. "How did you acquire such a collection?" Lila asked, her professional curiosity temporarily overriding the awareness of his proximity. Julian's expression shifted subtly. "After my wife left, I needed something to care for, something that wouldn't leave." The simple honesty of his answer caught her off guard. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Don't be. It was 13 years ago." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She couldn't accept that I couldn't give her children. The revelation hung in the air between them, intimate and raw. Before Lila could respond, fat raindrops began falling from the suddenly cloudy sky. "Perfect timing," Julian muttered, looking upward as the gentle sprinkle transformed into a downpour within seconds. He grabbed Lila's hand. "This way." They ran through the intensifying rain, her camera protected in its waterproof bag, until they reached a smaller greenhouse hidden among bamboo stands. Julian fumbled with keys, finally pushing the door open and pulling Lila inside just as thunder cracked overhead. Safe but soaked, they stood dripping on the stone floor, both breathing heavily from the unexpected sprint. Raindrops clung to Lila's eyelashes and rolled down her cheeks. Without thinking, Julian reached out, gently brushing one from her face. The touch lingered, his fingers warm against her rain-cooled skin. For a moment, neither moved, the only sound their mingled breathing and the rhythmic pounding of rain on the glass roof. "You're soaked," he said finally, breaking the spell. "I should find you something dry." To Lila's surprise, the greenhouse contained not just plants but a small living area in the rear, a comfortable couch, a simple desk, and behind a Japanese screen, what appeared to be a small changing area. "I often work through the night," Julian explained, noticing her curious glance. He disappeared behind the screen, returning with a soft navy shirt. "It's all I have here, I'm afraid." "Thank you," Lila said, accepting the offering. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, sending that now familiar current between them. She changed behind the screen, hyper-aware of Julian's presence just feet away. His shirt enveloped her like an embrace, the fabric carrying his scent, that same subtle cologne from the night before mixed with something distinctly male and earthy. When she emerged, Julian had removed his own wet shirt and donned a simple gray t-shirt that clung to his still damp shoulders. The sight of him in this more casual state, powerful shoulders evident beneath the thin cotton, made her breath catch. "Better?" he asked, his eyes traveling from her bare feet up the length of her legs to where his shirt ended mid-thigh. "Much," she managed, grateful for the greenhouse's dim lighting that hid her blush. Outside, the storm intensified, lightning occasionally illuminating the interior in stark white flashes. "The flower," Lila remembered suddenly, "the one that blooms once a decade. Will we miss it?" Julian smiled, a warm expression that transformed his usually serious face. "We're standing right next to it." He guided her to a large pot containing what appeared to be an unremarkable cactus. As they watched, the outer petals of a bud were slowly unfurling, revealing glimpses of a vibrant crimson interior. Silenicerius whittii, he said softly, standing close behind her. So rare that botanists thought it extinct until the 1980s. It begins opening at nightfall and will be fully bloomed by midnight. It's beautiful, Lila whispered, reaching for her camera. For the next hour, she photographed the flower's gradual revelation, occasionally asking Julian to hold a light or adjust a nearby plant. Each request brought him closer, their bodies inevitably touching in the confined space. Each contact lingered longer than necessary, each retreat more reluctant. As midnight approached, the cactus flower had fully opened, revealing a spectacular bloom of deep red and gold. Lila lowered her camera, simply absorbing the moment. "Thank you for sharing this with me," she said, turning to find Julian standing much closer than she'd realized. "Thank you for seeing it," he replied, his voice hushed. "Really seeing it." Thunder cracked directly overhead, startling Lila. She instinctively stepped backward, colliding with Julian's solid chest. His hands came up to steady her, gripping her upper arms gently. She could feel the heat of his body through the thin shirt, his breath warm against her hair. Instead of stepping away, Lila found herself turning in his arms, her face tilted up to his. Their eyes met in the dim light, a question passing between them. Julian's gaze dropped to her lips, his hand still holding her arms, neither pulling her closer nor pushing her away, leaving the choice entirely to her. For a suspended moment, they stood at the precipice of something dangerous and exhilarating. Then, with deliberate slowness, Lila pulled back, creating a small space between them. "The storm is letting up," she observed, her voice slightly unsteady. Julian released her immediately, respecting her unspoken boundary. "I'll drive you home when it's safe." The tension between them didn't dissipate but transformed, becoming something deeper, a mutual acknowledgement of attraction tempered by restraint. As they settled on the small couch to wait out the storm, their conversation turned to safer topics: her photography career, his botanical research, their shared love of capturing beauty, others overlooked. By the time the rain stopped, they had established a comfortable rhythm, like old friends reconnecting rather than new acquaintances. Yet beneath this ease simmered something far more potent, something neither was ready to name. As promised, Julian drove her home, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. At her door, he maintained a respectful distance. "I have another commission for you," he said, "if you're interested." Lila knew she should decline. Professional boundaries existed for a reason, and everything about Julian Hart threatened those boundaries. Yet she found herself nodding. "I'd like that," she said, echoing her words from the night before. Julian's smile was brief but genuine. "I'll call you tomorrow." As he turned to leave, Lila suddenly asked, "Why me? There are renowned botanical photographers who would kill for access to your collection." He paused, considering her question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Because you don't just photograph flowers, Lila. You see their souls." With that enigmatic answer, he was gone, leaving her once again wondering what forces had drawn them together. In his car, Julian gripped the steering wheel tightly, still feeling the phantom sensation of Lila in his arms. For 28 years, he'd focused solely on his impossible dream of fatherhood, letting it consume him until his marriage had crumbled and he'd withdrawn from the world. Now, for the first time in decades, he found himself thinking about someone else. It terrified him, and yet, as he drove home through the rain-washed streets, he was already planning their next meeting, already imagining her expression when she saw what he would show her next, because in Lila's eyes, he'd glimpsed something he'd thought forever lost to him: possibility. Chapter 3: Thorned Hearts. Over the following weeks, Lila's visits to the Hart estate became a regular occurrence. What had begun as a professional arrangement had evolved into something neither of them named but both felt, a connection that transcended their shared love of rare botanicals. Tonight, Julian had promised to show her something extraordinary: a night-blooming water lily from the Amazon that flowered only 3 nights each year. Lila arrived early, her anticipation building as she drove through the now familiar gates. She found him kneeling beside the custom-built pool that housed his aquatic specimens, sleeves rolled up and hands submerged in the water. He hadn't heard her approach, giving her a rare moment to observe him unguarded. His face was relaxed, focused entirely on adjusting the lily's position to catch the moonlight. "You look natural doing that," she said softly. Julian glanced up, his serious expression immediately warming. "Most people think I pay others to care for my collection, but you prefer to do it yourself," Lila observed, setting down her equipment and kneeling beside him. "May I?" He nodded, and she rolled up her sleeves, submerging her hands alongside his in the warm water. Their fingers brushed beneath the surface as they gently positioned the lily's pad. "Why do you prefer doing it yourself?" she asked, acutely aware of his proximity. Julian was quiet for a moment. "When my marriage ended, I needed something that wouldn't reject me, something I could nurture." The confession hung between them, vulnerable and honest. "How long were you married?" Lila asked, her voice gentle. 13 years, he replied, his focus still on the lily. "Clara wanted children. I did too, desperately, but after years of specialists and treatments, he trailed off. She found someone who could give her what I couldn't." The pain in his voice was palpable, decades old, but still raw. Impulsively, Lila placed her wet hand over his. "I'm sorry." Julian turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining underwater. For several heartbeats, they remained like that, connected in the warm pool beneath the floating lily. "Your turn," he said finally, eyes meeting hers. Fair exchange. Lila withdrew her hand reluctantly, busying herself with adjusting her camera settings. "What do you want to know?" "The heartbreaks you mentioned." 3, you said. She hadn't expected him to remember that detail from their first meeting. "You have good memory." "Selective," he corrected, a small smile playing at his lips. "I remember what matters." The implication that her past heartbreaks mattered to him wasn't lost on Lila. She focused on her camera, avoiding his gaze. "The first was college, typical story. The second was a photographer I assisted. He used me to get connections in the industry." Julian waited patiently when she paused, not pushing but clearly interested in the third story. "The third was Marcus," she continued finally. "We were engaged. 2 weeks before the wedding, I overheard him talking to his friend." Her voice hardened. "He said he'd always wanted to experience being with a beautiful woman of color before settling down. I was his exotic adventure, a box to check off." Julian's expression darkened. "Where is he now?" The question surprised her. "I don't know." "Why, so I know which botanical show never to invite him to," he replied, his tone lighter but his eyes still serious. The protective sentiment warmed something inside Lila. "Careful, mister. Heart, that almost sounds like you care." "Julian," he corrected, "and is it so hard to believe that I might?" The question hung between them, more intimate than their clasped hands had been. Before Lila could respond, the lily began to move, its petals slowly unfurling in the moonlight. "It's starting," Julian whispered, the moment shifting back to shared professional passion. For the next hour, they worked in tandem, Lila photographing, Julian adjusting lights and reflectors to capture the lily's rare beauty. They moved around each other with practiced ease, occasionally touching as they reached for the same equipment or positioned themselves for better angles. Each contact sent that now familiar electricity between them, acknowledged by quickened breaths but never discussed. As midnight approached, Julian suggested they take a break. From a hidden refrigerator built into what looked like a storage cabinet, he produced a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "To celebrate the bloom?" Lila asked, accepting a glass. "And good company," he added, his eyes holding hers as they clinked glasses. The champagne was excellent, as she'd expected, but what surprised her was the picnic he unveiled. Midnight blooming jasmine tea, delicate sandwiches, and chocolate-dipped strawberries arranged on fine china. "You planned this," she observed, touched by the thoughtfulness. Julian's smile was almost shy. "I thought you might be hungry." They sat on a cushioned bench near the lily, close enough that their shoulders touched. The conversation flowed easily between botanical discussions and more personal revelations. His childhood fascination with plants, her struggle to be taken seriously as a photographer focusing on flowers in the dark, as one critic had dismissively described her work. "They don't understand," Julian said, his voice low and intense. "Night bloomers reveal themselves only to those patient enough to wait, observant enough to notice. They're not performing for an audience. They're being their truest selves in the quiet hours." "Like people," Lila agreed. "Our true selves emerge when no one's watching." "Is that when your true self emerges, Lila? When no one's watching?" His question was gentle but penetrating. She considered it seriously. Maybe. Or maybe when the right person is watching. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, the professional pretense falling away completely. Julian set down his champagne glass and reached out, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek. "I've been watching you," he admitted quietly. not just your work, you. Lila's heart thundered in her chest. I've noticed. His hand moved to cup her face, thumb gently stroking her cheekbone. And I've been watching you too. The admission hung between them for one breathless moment before Julian leaned forward, closing the distance. His lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it was barely there. A question, not a demand. When Lila responded, leaning into him and parting her lips slightly, the kiss deepened, becoming something neither had anticipated, but both had wanted. His hand slid from her face to the nape of her neck, fingers tangling in her curls as he drew her closer. Lila's hands found his shoulders, feeling the strength beneath his shirt as the kiss intensified. He tasted of champagne and desire, his usual restraint giving way to something more primal. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing heavily. Julian rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed, as if savoring the moment. I've wanted to do that since I found you in my garden, he confessed. Why didn't you? His eyes opened, meeting hers with characteristic honesty. Because you're not a rare specimen to collect, Lila. He hesitated, searching for words. You deserve more than being wanted. You deserve to be seen. The sentiment touched her deeply, addressing her deepest fear of being desired, but not truly valued. Before she could respond, a sudden downpour erupted, the summer storm catching them by surprise for the second time. Unlike their first rainy encounter, this time they didn't run for shelter. Instead, Julian pulled Lila to her feet and out from under the canopy, protecting them into the warm summer rain. Water plastered her dress to her body and his shirt to his chest as he pulled her close again. I want to see all of you, Lila, he said, rain streaming down his face. Not just the beautiful parts, the damaged ones too. The thorns, not just the petals. Instead of answering with words, Lila pulled him down for another kiss, this one passionate from the first touch. His arms encircled her waist, lifting her slightly as the kiss deepened, neither caring about the rain soaking them to the skin. When they broke apart, Julian's expression had changed, the restraint back though his eyes still smoldered with barely contained desire. We should go inside, he said, his voice rough. This isn't how I imagine. Lila understood his hesitation, his gentleman's instinct battling with desire. She laid a hand on his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palm. How did you imagine it? The question was bold, more forward than she'd intended, but the night's magic and the champagne had lowered her usual guards. Julian covered her hand with his own. Not in the rain, not rushed. His eyes held her steadily. You deserve better than that. The respect in his voice, the restraint it must have cost him, only made Lila want him more, but she recognized the wisdom in his words. Whatever was happening between them was too important to rush. Take me inside then, she said softly, just to get dry. His heated glance told her he understood the double meaning in her words. With gentle firmness, he led her toward the main house, not the greenhouse where they'd sheltered during the last storm, but into his personal space. The mansion's interior was surprisingly warm and inviting, modern but comfortable. Julian led her to a guest bathroom, providing plush towels and a robe. Take your time, he said, his voice controlled once more. I'll find something dry for you to wear. Alone in the luxurious bathroom, Lila studied her reflection, flushed cheeks, swollen lips, eyes bright with excitement and trepidation. She hardly recognized herself. The woman in the mirror looked alive, in a way she hadn't in years, perhaps ever. When she emerged in his soft robe, she found Julian in the kitchen, similarly robed, making tea. Something domestic and intimate about the scene touched her deeply. He looked up as she entered, his expression softening. Better? He asked. The same question from their first rainy encounter. Much, she echoed her previous response, smiling at the symmetry. He handed her a steaming mug of jasmine tea. Your clothes are in the dryer. They'll be ready soon. Thank you. The mundane practicality of the moment grounded her, bringing clarity after the heightened emotions of their kiss in the rain. They settled in his living room, a comfortable space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the illuminated gardens. The storm continued outside, providing a soothing backdrop to their conversation, which had returned to safer topics, her upcoming exhibition, his recent acquisition of seeds from a Japanese monastery. Yet beneath this superficial normalcy, something profound had changed. Their kisses had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, transforming their relationship irrevocably. When her clothes were dry and the storm had passed, Julian drove her home as he always did, but at her door, instead of their usual polite goodnight, he pulled her close for one more lingering kiss. I don't know what this is between us, he admitted, resting his forehead against hers, but I know I want to find out. Lila smiled, her heart full. Then let's find out together. As his car disappeared down her street, Lila touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the imprint of his kiss. For the first time in years, she was allowing herself to hope, not just for passion, but for something deeper, something true. What she didn't know was that Julian was driving home with the same hope and the same fear, that whatever was blooming between them might be as fragile and fleeting as the night flowers they both cherished. Or perhaps, just perhaps, it might be something rare and enduring, rooted in mutual understanding and genuine sight of each other's thorned hearts. Chapter 4. Proposition in bloom 3 months into their relationship. Lila and Julian had developed a rhythm. Weekdays were devoted to their careers, evenings and weekends to each other, split between his botanical sanctuary and exploring hidden gardens together. Tonight, Julian had been mysteriously secretive, asking Lila only to dress for the stars. She had chosen a twilight purple dress that shimmered when she moved. His driver collected her with an envelope containing a single dried flower petal and a note in Julian's handwriting. "Follow the petals to find me." The drive took them beyond the city limits to Julian's estate. Instead of stopping at the main house, they continued to a glass dome Lila had never seen before. A trail of luminescent flower petals led from the car to the entrance. Inside, the dome was transformed. The ceiling projected a perfect replica of the night sky, while the floor held plush cushions and low tables bearing champagne and desserts. Julian waited in dark trousers and a white shirt, open at the throat. "Welcome to my observatory," he said, taking her hands. "Do you like it?" "It's magical," she breathed, taking in the meticulous details. Night-blooming flowers arranged around the perimeter, their fragrance filling the air. "I built this place years ago," Julian explained. "When insomnia became my constant companion, I would come here to study the stars. Another beauty that reveals itself in darkness," Lila observed. "Exactly. You're the first person I've ever brought here." They settled among the cushions, champagne in hand, shoulders touching as they gazed upward. The conversation flowed easily between them. "I have something for you," Julian said, reaching into his pocket. He handed her a small key. "This is for whenever you want to visit the greenhouses, even when I'm traveling." Lila turned the key over in her palm. His botanical collection was his sanctuary. Access to it meant far more than any diamond. "Thank you," she said, leaning over to kiss him. What began as gentle gratitude quickly deepened. Julian's arms encircled her as the kiss intensified. When his lips moved to her neck, Lila guided his hand to her zipper, her intent unmistakable. With deliberate slowness, Julian helped her slip the dress from her shoulders. "You are exquisite," he whispered. Their lovemaking unfolded with the same attention to detail Julian brought to everything that mattered. He learned her body with reverent patience, discovering what made her gasp, what made her moan. When they finally joined, the connection was more intense than Lila had ever experienced, not just physically, but emotionally. Afterward, they lay entwined among the cushions, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare back. Above them, the simulated stars continued their slow rotation. "I never expected you," Julian said quietly. "After Clara left, I thought that part of my life was over." "Which part?" "Feeling, wanting something more than success or rare plants." For a long moment, they simply gazed at each other. Then something shifted in Julian's expression, a shadow of his former guardedness returning. "What is it?" Lila asked, sensing the change. He sat up, reaching for his shirt and handing her a silk robe. Once they were both partially dressed, he took her hands. "There's something I need to tell you," he began. "Something I should have told you before tonight." "You can tell me anything," she assured him. "When I told you about my marriage ending because I couldn't give Clara children, that was only part of the story. After she left, I became obsessed with the idea of fatherhood. I tried everything: experimental treatments, adoption agencies, even surrogacy, but nothing worked." His grip on her hands tightened. "2 months ago, just after we met, my doctor contacted me about a new treatment, something experimental that might give me one last chance." Lila's heart pounded. "And I decided to try it. At my age, with my medical history, this might be my only opportunity." Something cold settled in Lila's stomach. "Why are you telling me this now?" Julian released her hands, standing to pace. "Because I care about you, Lila, more than I expected. 2 years' circumstances, she repeated. Which are? He stopped, turning to face her with an expression of mingled hope and desperation. Give me a baby, and I'll give you anything you want, even my fortune. The words shattered the intimate cocoon they'd created. Lila felt as if she'd been doused with ice water. What did you say? She whispered. Julian knelt before her. I know how it sounds, but please understand, this isn't just about having an heir. It's about the family I've wanted my entire life. Lila stood, putting distance between them. So that's what this has been about these past months. All an elaborate seduction to get me to carry your child? No. Julian reached for her, but she backed away. What happened between us? That's real, Lila, is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I'm just another rare specimen for your collection. A fertile young woman to give the great Julian Hart what his fortune couldn't buy. That's not fair. Fair? Lila laughed bitterly, struggling into her dress. Was it fair to make me fall in love with you when all you wanted was a womb? The words slipped out before she could stop them. The first time either had mentioned love. Lila, please, Julian implored, his composed facade crumbling. I care about you deeply. Why didn't you tell me? The hurt in her voice was unmistakable. I need to leave now. At least let me drive you, he said, his voice hollow. I'll call a car. As she waited for the rideshare, an uncomfortable silence stretched between them. I never meant to hurt you, he said finally. Everything between us has been real for me, Lila. Lila paused at the door, turning to face him one last time. You should have trusted me enough to be honest. Instead, you proved you're just like all the others, seeing what I can give you, not who I am. With that, she walked out into the night, leaving behind the observatory where, minutes earlier, she'd felt closer to him than she'd ever felt to another human being. In the observatory, Julian stood motionless, surrounded by the evidence of their passion. As the simulated stars continued their silent rotation overhead, he faced the possibility that, in his desperate pursuit of fatherhood, he might have destroyed his last chance at genuine love. Chapter 5, Wilted Dreams. 2 weeks passed without a word from Julian. 2 weeks of Lila throwing herself into work, accepting every assignment that would take her far from the city and the memories haunting her there. She ignored his calls, deleted his messages unread, and returned the small gifts that arrived at her door with methodical determination. Today found her in Savannah, photographing the city's historic cemeteries for a travel magazine. The assignment was perfect. Surrounded by monuments to the dead, she could finally put her feelings for Julian to rest. Just 3 more shots, she murmured to herself, adjusting her lens to capture the play of afternoon light across a weathered statue. The pain hit without warning, a sharp, twisting agony that doubled her over. Lila clutched her abdomen, camera dangling forgotten from its strap, as she sank to her knees on the stone path. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool autumn air, nausea rising as another wave of pain crashed through her. Miss, are you all right? A concerned tourist approached, his voice seeming to come from far away. Lila tried to respond, but could only shake her head as darkness crept into the edges of her vision. The last thing she remembered was the stranger calling for help as she collapsed onto the sun-warmed stones. She woke to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the antiseptic smell of a private room. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember how she'd gotten there. Then the pain returned, duller now but still present, and memory flooded back. Miss Moon, you're awake. A doctor approached her bedside, chart in hand. I'm Dr. Moreau. How are you feeling? Like someone's stabbing me. Lila managed, her throat dry. What happened? The doctor's expression turned serious. You have a condition called endometriosis. It appears quite severe based on our initial scans. We need to perform surgery to remove the affected tissue. Lila struggled to process this information through the haze of pain medication. Surgery? When? Tomorrow morning, Dr. Moreau replied. We've already scheduled it. Is there someone we can call for you? Family? Partner? Lila thought briefly of Julian, then pushed the thought away. No, there's no one. The doctor looked skeptical, but didn't press. The nurse will be in shortly with more information about the procedure. Try to rest. She hesitated, then added, Miss Moon, I should mention, this condition can affect fertility. After surgery, we'll have a better idea of the extent, but you should be prepared for that possibility. After the doctor left, Lila turned her face to the wall, tears sliding silently onto the starched hospital pillow. If only her grandmother were here. the woman who had raised her after her mother's abandonment when Lila was 7. Her grandmother, a university botanist who had instilled Lila's love of plants, would have known exactly what to say in this moment of crisis. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. The very thing Julian valued her for might be compromised. Would he still want her if she couldn't give him the child he so desperately desired? "I wouldn't care," came a familiar voice from the doorway. Lila turned, certain she was hallucinating. But there stood Julian, disheveled in a way she'd never seen him, unshaven, tie loosened, dark circles beneath his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. "How did you find me?" she asked, too surprised to maintain her anger. "Your assistant," he approached cautiously, as if expecting her to order him out. "She called when you missed your check-in. May I?" He gestured to the chair beside her bed. Lila nodded, suddenly too exhausted to fight. "How long have you been here?" 6 hours. He sat, running a hand through his already rumpled hair. "I heard what the doctor said." Heat rushed to Lila's face. "So now you know. I might not be able to give you what you want after all." Julian leaned forward, his expression pained. "I deserve that, but Lila, I meant what I said. I wouldn't care. Wouldn't you?" She turned away again, unable to bear the sincerity in his eyes. "Your precious last chance at fatherhood gone. 28 years of wanting a child, and I can't give you that. Look at me," he said quietly. When she didn't, his voice softened further. "Please." Reluctantly, Lila met his gaze. What she saw there wasn't disappointment or calculation, but something that looked remarkably like love. "I've had 2 weeks to think about what matters to me," Julian said, choosing his words carefully. 2 weeks of calling, writing, sending flowers, anything to get you to talk to me. 2 weeks of realizing I'd traded the real treasure for a shadow. "What treasure?" Lila whispered. "You." He reached for her hand, and she was too weak to pull away. "Not what you could give me. Just you, Lila. Your passion, your strength, the way you see beauty where others see nothing." Fresh tears welled in her eyes. "How can I believe you?" "You can't. Not yet." His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "But if you'll let me, I'll spend however long it takes proving it to you. Starting right now." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not leaving this hospital until you're well enough to throw me out yourself." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I've already arranged for the best specialist to consult on your case, a private duty nurse for after the surgery, and cleared my schedule for the next month." Despite herself, Lila felt a flicker of warmth. "And if I do throw you out, then I'll go," he said simply. "But I'll be waiting when you're ready to talk. No pressure, no propositions, just me hoping for a second chance I probably don't deserve." Before she could respond, a nurse entered with medication. Julian stood but didn't leave, instead moving to the window to give her privacy. As the nurse adjusted her, the fourth Lila watched his silhouette against the fading evening light. The set of his shoulders spoke of tension, of fear, not the confident billionaire she'd first met, but a man terrified of losing something precious. When they were alone again, Lila found herself too drowsy from the medication to maintain her defenses. "You can stay," she murmured, eyes growing heavy, "at least until I fall asleep." Relief visibly washed over Julian as he returned to her side. Without asking permission, he took her hand again, his touch warm and secure. "I'll be here when you wake up too. I promise." As consciousness slipped away, Lila felt his lips press gently against her forehead, the gesture tender, protective, without a hint of the desire that had marked their previous encounters. For the first time since leaving his observatory, she allowed herself to wonder if perhaps his feelings for her were real after all. Morning came with hospital routines and pre-surgical preparations. The procedure would be extensive, requiring 4 hours in the operating room, as surgeons carefully excised the endometrial tissue that had spread throughout her pelvic region. True to his word, Julian hadn't left. He'd obviously used an adjoining bathroom to freshen up, but his clothes were the same, and the indentation on the small couch suggested he'd spent the night there. "You didn't have to sleep here," Lila said, her voice stronger after a night's rest. "I wanted to." He approached her bed, maintaining a respectful distance. "How are you feeling?" "Scared," she admitted. The vulnerability of her situation making honesty easier. The doctor said. She hesitated. "Depending on what they find, I might not be able to have children at all." Julian's expression remained steady. "And how do you feel about that?" "Not for my sake. For yours." The question caught her off guard. No one had asked what she wanted, what she dreamed of beyond her career. "I don't know," she said truthfully. "I never thought about children much before. My work was always enough. And now, she considered this, now I'm not sure, but I'd like the choice to be mine, not taken from me by my body. Julian nodded, understanding in his eyes. Whatever happens in that operating room, it doesn't change who you are, Lila. It doesn't diminish your worth or what you have to offer the world. He paused, or what you mean to me. Before she could respond, orderlies arrived to transport her to surgery. Julian stepped back, his expression a mixture of concern and something deeper, more permanent. I'll be waiting, he promised as they wheeled her away. The last thing Lila saw before the doors closed was Julian standing alone in the center of the room, looking more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. A man who'd built an empire but now seemed to hold his entire world in a hospital gurney, disappearing down a sterile corridor. The surgery lasted the full 4 hours, a complex procedure as the surgeons meticulously removed the extensive endometrial growths. When the doctor emerged to speak with Julian, his scrubs bore evidence of the operation's complexity. The first night after surgery was the hardest. Pain medication left Lila drifting in and out of consciousness, while Julian maintained his vigil, learning from nurses how to check her incisions and monitor for complications. By dawn, he had become oddly proficient in reading her vital signs. Hours later, she woke more fully in recovery, aware first of pain radiating through her abdomen, then of a warm hand holding hers. Even before opening her eyes, she knew it was Julian, the subtle cologne, the strength in those fingers that could tenderly care for the most delicate plants. "Welcome back," he said softly, when her eyes fluttered open. "The surgery," she managed through dry lips, "it's scheduled for 7 a.m. tomorrow." Successful, he helped her sip water through a straw. "The doctor will explain everything when you're more alert," but they were able to remove all the affected tissue. Relief washed through her, followed immediately by the question she was almost afraid to ask. "And the rest?" Julian's expression was gentle. "The doctor says your chances of conceiving are reduced, but not eliminated. There would be challenges, but it's possible." Lila processed this information, surprised by the mixture of relief and sadness she felt. "Not the ideal surrogate after all," she said, attempting humor to mask her vulnerability. Instead of laughing, Julian looked stricken. "Don't," he said hoarsely. "Please don't think of yourself that way, not even as a joke." His reaction surprised her. "I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with a reverence that made her throat tight. "Sorry for ever making you feel like that was all I saw in you." For the first time since his proposition, Lila allowed herself to truly look at him, not just with the eyes of a hurt lover, but with the perceptive gaze that had made her an exceptional photographer. What she saw was exhaustion, remorse, fear, and beneath it all, a love so evident it seemed to radiate from him. "You really do care about me," she whispered, the realization settling over her like a warm blanket. "More than I've ever cared about anyone or anything," Julian confirmed, "including the child I thought I needed to be complete." He leaned closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I was wrong, Lila. You showed me that." As she drifted back to sleep, comforted by his presence and the quiet beeping of monitors, Lila felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of it. The possibility of believing that for once, a man might value her for herself alone. What she didn't yet know was how this medical crisis would change them both, how the next days of her recovery would forge a bond deeper than passion between them, or how Julian's patient devotion would slowly rebuild the trust his proposition had shattered. For now, it was enough that he was there, his hand in hers as she navigated the uncertain waters of healing, both her body and her heart. Chapter 6. Healing Reigns. By mid-February, 6 weeks after her surgery, Lila had made significant progress in her recovery, though she was still far from her full strength. "This is excessive," she protested weakly, as Julian carried her from the car to the sprawling beachfront property. "I could have walked." "The doctor said minimal exertion for 2 weeks," he reminded her, navigating the path with careful steps. "Besides, you weigh nothing." 3 days had passed since her surgery. 3 days of Julian never leaving her hospital room except to shower in the adjoining bathroom. 3 days of him handling calls with his executives while she slept. Of reading aloud from her favorite photography books when she was awake. Of learning her rhythms and needs with the same attentiveness he gave his rarest plants. When discharge time came, she'd expected to return to her apartment. Instead, Julian had suggested his coastal home for her recovery, private, peaceful, with fresh sea air to speed her healing. Too weak to argue effectively, she'd acquiesced, telling herself it was temporary. Now, as he pushed open the door with his shoulder and carried her inside, Lila caught her breath. Unlike his city mansion's modern sleekness, this home was all natural warmth, wide windows capturing the ocean view, comfortable furniture in soft blues and creams, driftwood sculptures, and potted palms bringing the outside in. "You'll be most comfortable here," Julian said, carrying her to a sun-filled room with a massive bed facing floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Atlantic like a living painting. "The bathroom is through there, with a tub the physical therapist recommended for when you're stronger." He set her gently on the bed, arranging pillows behind her with a care that made her throat tighten. His tenderness during her vulnerability was dismantling her defenses faster than any grand gesture could have. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Julian sat carefully on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. "You don't need to thank me, Lila. I'm here because I want to be." His gaze was steady, unguarded. "But if you ever want me to go, just say the word." The statement, and the power it returned to her, was exactly what she needed. Lila nodded, some tension releasing from her shoulders. "I want you to stay, for now." A small smile touched his lips. "I'll take it." The first week at the coastal home established new patterns between them. This marked the beginning of her second month of recovery. The initial month had focused solely on basic healing, managing pain, and preventing infection. Now she could gradually increase her activities, though still far from normal. Julian worked remotely from a study down the hall, checking on her hourly. The private nurse he'd hired visited each morning, but by unspoken agreement, he handled most of Lila's care himself, bringing medications, helping her to the bathroom when she was unsteady, even washing her hair when she couldn't manage it alone. Their conversations during this time were different, deeper, stripped of pretense. Julian opened up about his family history in ways he never had before. "My father built the business empire," he explained one evening as they watched the sunset. "But he was cold, distant, viewing me as an heir rather than a son. My mother tried to compensate with overprotection." "And your brother?" Lila asked, remembering a brief mention of a sibling. Julian's expression clouded. "Nathan was different, the only one who saw me as more than an heir or someone to be molded. My family history is complicated. Perhaps one day I'll tell you the whole story." She shared more about her own past in return. "After my mother abandoned us when I was 7, my grandmother raised me alone. She was a university botanist. That's where my love of plants began. She taught me that beauty isn't just in what's obvious, but in what requires patience to discover. I wish I could have met her," Julian said softly. "She would have loved your collection," Lila smiled, "and probably lectured you about proper soil pH for your moonflowers." With passion temporarily removed from the equation by her physical condition, they discovered new ways to connect. Julian told her about his childhood, growing up with wealth but emotional poverty. Lila shared stories of her grandmother, who had raised her, teaching her to see beauty in unexpected places. On the 8th day, feeling stronger, Lila insisted on sitting outside. Julian arranged a chaise lounge on the deck, overlooking the ocean, wrapping her in blankets against the autumn breeze. "I never expected this side of you," she admitted, as he handed her tea in her favorite mug, which she'd somehow retrieved from her apartment, along with her clothes and camera equipment. "What side?" he asked, settling into a chair beside her. "This nurturing part." She gestured to the careful arrangement he'd made for her comfort. "It's not what people see when they look at Julian Hart, business titan." His smile was tinged with sadness. "People see what I've shown them, the successful parts, the strong parts." He looked out toward the horizon. "No one wants to see a man defined by failure." "Failure?" Lila asked, surprised by his choice of words. "That's how I've seen myself for 28 years. His voice was matter-of-fact. Without self-pity. The man who couldn't give his wife children, couldn't create the family he always wanted. He turned back to her. "Until recently, I measured my worth by that single metric. And now?" she asked, her heart beating faster. "Now I realize there are many ways to nurture, to create legacy." His eyes held hers. Many ways to love. The word hung between them, neither confirming nor denying that it applied to what was growing between them. Instead of pursuing it, Lila changed direction. "Would you bring me my camera? I feel strong enough to hold it today." Julian returned with her equipment, watching as she tested its weight, and sighed with contentment at having her creative extension back in her hands. Understanding her need, he left her alone with the ocean view and her thoughts. That evening, reviewing her photographs, Lila was struck by an impulse. "Julian," she called softly. He appeared in the doorway immediately, concern evident. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." She patted the bed beside her. "Come look at these." He sat beside her, careful not to jostle the mattress, and examined her camera screen as she scrolled through the day's images, wave patterns, seabirds, driftwood textures. "They're beautiful," he said. "You see things others miss, even from a deck chair. I want to teach you," she said impulsively, "to photograph what you love." Surprise flickered across his face. "I'm not artistic. Everyone can learn to see," Lila insisted. "You taught me about your plants. Let me teach you about light and shadow." For the next 3 days, between her rest periods, Lila gave Julian basic photography lessons. He proved an apt pupil, his natural precision serving him well as he learned aperture settings and composition principles. What touched her most was his unwavering focus, the same intensity he brought to billion-dollar negotiations, now directed at understanding her passion. On the 12th day of her recovery, a perfect sunset painted the sky in spectacular colors. Feeling significantly stronger, Lila suggested they walk to the water's edge to photograph it. "Are you sure you're up to it?" Julian asked, his protective instincts still on high alert. "I need to feel the sand between my toes," she insisted. "Just to the waterline and back." He helped her navigate the wooden steps to the beach, his arm around her waist providing steady support. When they reached the water's edge, Lila closed her eyes, breathing deeply of the salt air as gentle waves lapped at her feet. "This is what healing feels like," she murmured. Julian stood slightly behind her, one hand still resting lightly at the small of her back. Without opening her eyes, Lila sensed him raise the camera she'd lent him. "What are you photographing?" she asked. "The most beautiful sunset I've ever seen," he replied softly. Something in his tone made her turn to look at him. The camera wasn't pointed at the horizon, but at her, capturing her profile against the painted sky. "I thought I was teaching you landscape photography," she said, her voice catching. "You taught me to capture what matters most to me." His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "Lila, these past weeks have been the most painful and most precious of my life." She knew he wasn't referring to her physical suffering, but to the emotional journey they'd navigated together. His regret, her hurt, their slow rebuilding of trust through small daily kindnesses and unguarded conversations. "For me too," she admitted, allowing herself to lean into him more fully, no longer just for physical support. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the sand. A cool breeze raised goosebumps on her arms, and without a word, Julian slipped off his light jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. The gesture was so natural, so unthinking in its consideration, that Lila felt something shift inside her, the last wall of resistance crumbling. She turned fully toward him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. "I think I'm ready now." "For what?" he asked, his voice husky with contained emotion. "To forgive you," she said simply, "and to believe that what's between us is real." Julian's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer with exquisite care for her still healing body. "It's the most real thing I've ever known." The kiss that followed was different from their earlier passionate encounters, tender, almost reverent, a promise rather than a demand. When they parted, Lila rested her forehead against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her cheek. "Will you stay with me tonight?" she asked quietly. "Just to hold me." His arms tightened slightly around her. "I'll hold you for as long as you'll let me." That night, Lila fell asleep in Julian's embrace, his body curled protectively around hers, his breathing eventually settling into the same rhythm as her own. For the first time since her surgery, perhaps the first time in years, she felt completely safe, completely seen. She woke shortly before dawn to find him still awake, watching over her in the gentle blue light of early morning. "Did you sleep at all?" she murmured, reaching up to touch his face. "Enough," he said, turning to kiss her palm. "I didn't want to miss this." "Miss what?" "The moment you came back to me," he said simply. "I was afraid it might be a dream." The vulnerability in his confession touched her deeply. This powerful man who controlled vast business empires was utterly defenseless before her, his heart completely exposed. "Not a dream," she assured him, drawing his face down to hers for a kiss that started gently, but quickly deepened with weeks of restrained desire. When his hand slid beneath her nightshirt, warm against her bare skin, Lila gasped, not in pain but pleasure. "We can't," she reminded him reluctantly. "Doctor's orders." Julian smiled against her lips. "There are many ways to express love, Lila. Let me show you some that won't endanger your healing." What followed was a revelation, his touch both reverent and knowing, bringing her pleasure without compromising her recovery. For the first time, Lila understood that passion could be an act of tenderness as much as desire. Later, as morning light strengthened through the windows, they lay entangled in the rumpled sheets, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her back. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by the ringing of Julian's phone. He checked the caller ID and frowned. "You should get that," Lila murmured, noticing his expression. He answered briefly, his responses clipped and formal, before ending the call with evident relief. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Just family matters," he replied vaguely. "Nothing for you to worry about." Something in his tone suggested otherwise, but Lila didn't press. They were still learning when to probe and when to give space. "I never thought I could feel this way," Julian confessed into her hair, "like nothing else matters, but this moment, this connection." Lila understood exactly what he meant. Her career ambitions, his business empire, all seemed distant compared to the profound intimacy they'd discovered. "It's like finding a night-blooming flower," she said, "something rare and precious that only reveals itself under certain conditions. And once revealed, changes everything," he added, his arms tightening around her. That afternoon, feeling stronger than she had since the surgery, Lila suggested they walk along the shore. Hand in hand, they strolled slowly down the beach, stopping frequently to examine interesting shells or watch sandpipers skittering along the water's edge. "I had plans, you know," Julian said, as they paused to rest on a driftwood log. "For your recovery, specialists, treatments, the best fertility experts." Lila tensed slightly. "For me or for your dream of a child?" He shook his head. "That's just it. Somewhere during these weeks, that dream changed." He took both her hands in his. "I realized I'd rather have you exactly as you are than risk losing you for a possibility that might never happen." "But you've wanted a child for 28 years, she reminded him, needing to be certain. "I've wanted connection, legacy, family," he corrected gently. "There are many ways to create those things, Lila. With you, I found something I didn't even know to look for. Someone who sees me, truly sees me." His thumbs traced circles on her palms. "If children come someday, in whatever form, that would be a blessing. But you are the miracle I never expected." Tears welled in Lila's eyes at the simple honesty in his voice. Without words, she leaned forward and kissed him, pouring into the contact everything she couldn't yet express verbally. As if responding to the intensity of the moment, the sky darkened suddenly, and fat raindrops began to fall. Instead of rushing for shelter, Julian pulled her to her feet and into his arms. "Dance with me," he said, his smile boyish and uninhibited in a way she'd never seen before. "In the rain?" She laughed, already following his lead. "It's becoming our thing, isn't it?" he teased, spinning her gently. Getting caught in storms together. As the warm summer rain soaked through their clothes, they danced barefoot on the wet sand, laughing like children. When Julian finally pulled her close, his soaked shirt clinging to his chest, his eyes held a question Lila had no trouble interpreting. "Yes," she said before he could ask. "Take me home." Their return to the house was unhurried despite the downpour. By silent agreement, they both understood that what awaited them was worth savoring, a new beginning baptized in healing rain. Chapter 7. Love's Surrender. By early April, 3 months after her surgery, Lila's physical recovery was largely complete. Their relationship had strengthened through her healing, dividing time between his estate and her downtown apartment. Tonight, Julian had asked her to pack an overnight bag without explanation. When his car arrived, he greeted her with a lingering kiss, seeming almost nervous beneath his usual composure. "Where are we going?" she asked as they drove away. "Somewhere we haven't been in a while," he replied cryptically. Recognition dawned as they turned onto the familiar coastal road leading to his beach house. They hadn't returned since her recovery, both understanding that the location held powerful memories. Twilight was settling when they arrived. Instead of the main house, Julian led her to a secluded cove, transformed with lanterns, suspended from driftwood posts, casting a warm glow over a dinner table set directly on the sand, surrounded by night-blooming jasmine. "I wanted somewhere special for tonight," he said, his hand warm at the small of her back. Their candlelit dinner was intimate and perfect. Afterward, Julian suggested a walk along the moonlit shore. As they strolled hand in hand, Lila sensed something electric between them, a tension of anticipation. "I've been thinking about what you said that night, in the observatory," he said finally. "You said I made you fall in love with me. Was that true?" Her heart quickened. It was true. It still is. Relief washed over his features. "I've loved you since that first night you trespassed in my garden, but I was afraid you'd think it was about what I wanted from you, rather than who you are." "I know the difference now," she said, touching his face. Their kiss was deep and unhurried. When they parted, Julian led her back toward the house. The master bedroom had been transformed. Gauzy curtains stirred in the sea breeze, candles flickered everywhere, and the bed was strewn with night-blooming flower petals. "Are you sure?" Julian asked, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Lila answered by reaching for his shirt buttons. "I've never been more sure of anything." Their lovemaking was unlike anything either had known, tender, yet passionate. Julian worshipped her body with reverence, while Lila met his passion with equal fervor. All hesitations dissolved in the certainty that this man loved her for herself alone. "I never knew it could be like this," she whispered afterward as they lay entwined, "like finding the missing piece of myself." "That's exactly it," he agreed, tightening his arms around her. As midnight approached, Julian held her close. "Stay with me, not just tonight, always." "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "Not yet. That deserves its own moment. For now, I'm asking you to live with me, to make a home with me." "Yes," she said, kissing him softly. 4 weeks later, they had settled into his city mansion. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Lila woke feeling strangely nauseated. When the nausea returned the following day with unusual fatigue, a suspicion began to form. On the third morning, while Julian was in an early meeting, she purchased a pregnancy test. The fertility specialist had explained that the 6 months following endometriosis surgery sometimes created a window of improved fertility before scar tissue could reform. Alone in their bathroom, Lila followed the test's instructions with trembling hands. When she looked down, the positive results seemed to glow in the morning light. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. What would Julian think? Would he believe this miraculous timing was coincidence, not calculation? Lost in these thoughts, she didn't hear him return until he called her name. In here, she managed, quickly hiding the test behind her. Julian appeared in the doorway, frowning with worry. "Are you sick?" "Not exactly sick," Lila hedged. "Maybe you should sit down." Revealing the test from behind her back, she held it out wordlessly. For a moment, he simply stared. Then understanding dawned, his eyes widening. "You're pregnant," he whispered. "I didn't think it would happen so soon after surgery. If ever," she said. "The doctor mentioned hormonal changes might temporarily increase fertility, but this feels like a miracle." Julian fell to his knees before her. Are you okay with this?" he asked, searching her face anxiously. The question, centered on her feelings rather than his dream, dissolved her fears. "I'm scared," she admitted, "but most of all, I'm worried about what this means for us." "What do you mean?" "After everything that happened, I don't want you to think I planned this somehow, to secure your fortune or fulfill your proposition." Understanding softened his expression. He took her face between his hands. That proposition was the act of a desperate man who didn't understand what really mattered. "The man I am now sees this as a miracle because it's part of you, part of us." A sob escaped her. "You really mean that?" "With all my heart." He gathered her into his arms. "I love you, Lila Moon. I would choose you without hesitation, baby or no baby." He pulled back slightly, reaching into his pocket for a small velvet box containing a stunning engagement ring, a rare blue sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. "I've been carrying this for weeks," he said. "Lila Moon, will you marry me? Not because of this unexpected blessing, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "Yes, 1,000 times yes," as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that promised forever. Lila marveled at life's unexpected patterns. Outside, rain fell softly, the same healing rain that had marked so many significant moments in their relationship. Inside, in Julian's arms, Lila finally allowed herself to believe in the rarest bloom of all, a love that flourished not in spite of life's storms, but because of them. Chapter 8: Unexpected Seeds. The news of Lila's pregnancy in late April brought a whirlwind of changes. Despite Julian's assurances that she should continue working, her body had other ideas. Morning sickness plagued her well into the afternoon, and fatigue forced her to scale back her photography commitments. "You don't have to cancel the Bali assignment," Julian said one evening, finding her at her desk, regretfully composing an email to her agent. "I could come with you." Lila smiled at his protective instinct. "A 16-hour flight in my condition? Not even your private jet could make that bearable." He settled behind her, strong hands gently massaging her shoulders. "I hate seeing you give up opportunities. It's not forever," she reminded him, leaning back into his touch. "And some opportunities are worth the sacrifice." Their life settled into a new pattern. Prenatal appointments with specialists Julian had researched meticulously, quiet evenings planning both their wedding and the nursery, and Lila's continued, if limited, photography work. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Her history of endometriosis meant increased monitoring and occasional scares that sent them rushing to the doctor. Through each worry, each midnight fear, Julian remained steadfast, his focus firmly on Lila's well-being rather than just the baby's. "I never thought I'd see Julian Hart flustered by anything," her obstetrician remarked after one particularly anxious visit. "He negotiates billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. But your blood pressure reading had him pacing like a nervous father from a sitcom." The observation warmed Lila. The man who had once coldly proposed a transactional pregnancy had transformed into someone who held her hair during morning sickness and read pregnancy books late into the night, highlighting passages with uncharacteristic enthusiasm. "I wish my grandmother could see this," Lila said one evening, as Julian massaged her feet. "She always told me I'd find my path, even when I was lost after art school, even when my photography was rejected by every gallery in the city." "She raised an extraordinary woman," Julian replied, his hands never stopping their gentle work. "I hope our children inherit your resilience." The mention of children in plural was hypothetical then, neither suspecting the truth growing within her. At 14 weeks, they received unexpected news during a routine ultrasound. "Well, this explains the severe morning sickness," the technician said, adjusting the wand on Lila's still flat abdomen. "There's not just one in there." Julian, who had been holding Lila's hand, went completely still. "What do you mean?" The technician turned the screen toward them. "Congratulations, you're having twins." Lila's eyes filled with tears as she stared at the two tiny forms on the monitor. After being told she might never conceive, she was carrying two perfect miracles. "Twins," Julian whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He pressed his lips to Lila's forehead, then her lips, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Two babies." The technician smiled at their obvious joy. "Would you like to know the sex?" They exchanged a glance, having discussed this possibility earlier. "Yes," they answered in unison. "Two girls," the technician announced. "Perfectly healthy from what I can see. Twin daughters." The phrase echoed in Lila's mind as they drove home in stunned silence, hands clasped tightly between them. For a man who had spent 28 years yearning for a child, learning he would father two at once seemed almost too perfect. That evening, as spring rain tapped against the windows of their bedroom, Julian held Lila against his chest, his hand splayed protectively over her stomach. "Are you happy?" she asked softly, needing confirmation despite the evidence of his joy. His answer was to guide her hand to his face, letting her feel the dampness of tears he'd held back all day. "Beyond anything I ever imagined," he whispered. "Not because they're girls, not because there are two, but because they're ours, Lila. Something we created together." The depth of his emotion overwhelmed her. This was not the reaction of a man who had gotten what he wanted through calculation, but of one who had received a blessing he had stopped believing possible. "I love you," she said simply, turning in his arms to kiss him. What began as gentle affection quickly deepened into something more urgent. Pregnancy had heightened Lila's sensitivity, making their lovemaking more intense than ever. Julian worshipped her changing body with reverent hands, his touch both protective and passionate as they moved together in the dim light, rain still falling softly outside. Afterward, curled together in the tangled sheets, Julian's hand returned to its now habitual place on her stomach. "I want to be married before they arrive," he said quietly. "Not because of convention, but because I want us to be a family in every way when we welcome them." Lila agreed. They had planned a winter wedding, but with twins, an earlier date seemed prudent. Within weeks, arrangements were underway for a small September ceremony in the botanical garden where they'd spent so many happy days. As Lila's body changed, Julian's attentiveness only increased. He took personal control of renovations to create a perfect nursery, Not one as originally planned, but two, connected by a sitting room where they could spend time with their daughters. Each detail was overseen with the precision he brought to business deals, but with an emotional investment that surprised those who knew only his professional persona. By late July, reaching her 18th week of pregnancy, Lila's condition was visible enough to announce publicly. She had worried about the reaction, how people would perceive their relationship once the news broke. "They'll think I trapped you," she confessed one night, "that I'm just another gold digger who got pregnant to secure her future." Julian's expression hardened. "Let them think what they want. We know the truth." Despite his reassurance, the announcement did bring scrutiny. Business publications speculated about succession plans now that the famously childless Hart would have heirs. Society columns dredged up Lila's modest background, subtly implying what she had feared. She weathered it better than expected, focusing instead on the growing life within her and the daily joy of building a future with Julian. Their wedding plans progressed, as did preparations for the twins' arrival. Then, 6 weeks before their wedding, an unexpected visitor arrived at their door. Lila was alone, reviewing photographs in her studio, when Everett, their butler, appeared with unusual hesitation. "There's a Miss Beatrice Sterling requesting to see Mr. Hart," he said. When informed he's not available, she asks for you instead. The name triggered a faint recollection. Hadn't Julian mentioned a Clara's family in one of their conversations? Did she say what it's regarding? "Only that it's a family matter, madam." Curiosity piqued. Lila agreed to meet the visitor. The woman who entered was elegantly dressed, perhaps 48, with the confident bearing of old money. Her sharp eyes immediately went to Lila's pronounced baby bump before returning to her face with cool assessment. "So you're Julian's latest project," she said, declining a seat. "I'm Beatrice Sterling, his former sister-in-law." Lila maintained her composure despite the insulting implication. "Lila Moon, his fiancée. Yes, I've read about you." Beatrice's tone made clear what she thought of what she'd read. "Quite the fairy tale, the photographer who captured more than rare flowers. What can I do for you, Miss Sterling?" Lila asked, refusing to engage with the barb. Beatrice paced the room, examining photographs with performative interest. "I came to warn you," she said finally, "about what you're getting yourself into. And what might that be? A family built on guilt and obligation." Beatrice turned to face her directly. "Did he tell you why he can't have children, or couldn't, before whatever miracle you've apparently worked?" A chill ran through Lila. "His fertility issues are private. They're the result of an accident when he was 17, Beatrice continued, as if Lila hadn't spoken. "An accident caused by my late husband, his brother Nathan. They were racing their father's cars." Nathan cut Julian off. "The crash nearly killed him and left him with injuries that doctors said would prevent him from ever fathering children." The revelation stunned Lila. Julian had never mentioned a brother, let alone this accident. "Nathan never forgave himself," Beatrice went on. "He spent the rest of his life trying to make amends, giving Julian opportunities in the family business, introducing him to Clara, my cousin." Her expression hardened. "When Clara left Julian, because he couldn't give her children, Nathan took his own life. The guilt was too much." Lila stared at her, pieces clicking into place. Julian's obsession with fatherhood, his refusal to discuss his ex-wife or family. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because history repeats itself." Beatrice stepped closer. "Julian doesn't love you. He's obsessed with having a child, any child, to prove he's overcome what my husband did to him. Once those babies are born, once he has his proof, he'll lose interest. It's not about family for him. It's about winning a 3-decade war with his own inadequacy." The accusation landed like a physical blow. "I think you should leave," Lila said, her voice steady, despite the trembling that had started inside her. "I'm not your enemy," Beatrice insisted. "I watched this destroy Clara. I won't stand by while another woman is used and discarded once she's served her purpose. You know nothing about my relationship with Julian. Don't I? Let me guess. He found you during some low point in your life, made you feel special, valued. Then, once you were emotionally invested, he mentioned how desperately he wanted a child. He probably even offered you financial security in exchange. That's his pattern." Before Lila could respond, the studio door opened, and Julian himself appeared, his expression thunderous as he took in the scene. "Beatrice," his voice was ice. "Who let you in?" "Your loyal staff, thinking I was still family." She faced him without flinching. "I was just telling your fiancé the truth about your brother. The truth about why these miraculous babies are so important to you. Julian's gaze shot to Lila, who stood pale and shaking. Whatever she's told you, is it true? Lila interrupted quietly. About the accident, your brother? The flicker of pain across his face was answer enough. Yes, he admitted, but not the way she's framed it. Beatrice gave a cold laugh. Of course, always the victim, never the villain. She gathered her handbag. I've said what I came to say. The rest is up to you, Miss Moon. After she left, silence stretched between them. Julian approached Lila cautiously, as if she might bolt. Lila, why didn't you tell me? The hurt in her voice was unmistakable. After everything we've shared, why keep this secret? I tried to begin that conversation several times, he said quietly. Remember at the beach house, when I mentioned my family was complicated, when I talked about Nathan without explaining who he truly was, I couldn't find the right moment to unburden that part of my history. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of agitation. Because it's the most painful part of my past, and the least relevant to who I am now, to who we are together. Not relevant? Lila's voice rose. Your ex-wife's cousin just told me our entire relationship is you working through trauma and guilt. That once the babies are born, you'll discard me like you apparently did her. That's not true. He reached for her, but she stepped back. Beatrice has her own agenda. Nathan's death destroyed her, and she's blamed me ever since. But was what she said about Clara true? That your brother introduced you? That this obsession with having children started with guilt over the accident? Julian's shoulders sagged. Parts of it, yes, but not the way she twisted it. Then explain it to me, Lila demanded, one hand protectively covering her stomach where their daughters grew. Make me understand why I shouldn't believe her. For the next hour, Julian revealed the complete history he'd kept hidden. The accident that had nearly killed him at 17, leaving him with reduced fertility. His brother's overwhelming guilt that poisoned their relationship. His marriage to Clara, which had begun with love but ended when the pressure to conceive became too great. After she left, I did become obsessed, he admitted, his voice raw with emotion. Not because of Nathan or the accident, but because I felt I'd failed as a man, as a husband. Having a child became proof that I wasn't broken. And me? Lila asked. The question that mattered most. Was I just another attempt at that proof? At first, he admitted with painful honesty, that night in the observatory, yes, I saw potential for what you could give me. He moved closer, taking her hand when she didn't pull away. But then I fell in love with you, Lila. Real, transformative love that made me realize a child wasn't what I needed to be whole. You did that. Tears streamed down her face. How can I believe that now, knowing what I know? Because of what happened after your surgery, he reminded her gently. When we both faced the possibility that you might never be able to have children, I chose you then, without hesitation. I would choose you now, babies or no babies. The sincerity in his eyes began to dissolve her doubts, but uncertainty lingered. There's so much I didn't know about you. Ask me anything, he offered. No more secrets. That night, they talked until dawn, Julian answering every question with unflinching honesty, Lila struggling to reconcile this new information with the man she'd come to love. By morning, exhausted but clearer, she made her decision. She wasn't ready to fully forgive yet. Trust, once damaged, couldn't be restored in a single conversation, no matter how heartfelt. I understand what you've told me, she said carefully, but I need time to process this. It's a lot to take in. Julian nodded, accepting her response without pushing for more. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. Over the next week, they maintained a careful distance, sharing the same house, but with Lila retreating to her thoughts frequently. She observed Julian closely during this time, noting how he respected her need for space while still demonstrating his love through small, consistent actions, preparing her favorite foods, ensuring her comfort, handling business calls in another room to give her quiet. Each night, he would ask permission before placing his hand on her stomach to feel the babies move, never assuming his right to this intimacy. This respect, more than words, gradually rebuilt her trust. 1 week after Beatrice's visit, Lila found Julian in his study, reviewing hospital construction plans for a new NICU wing his foundation was funding, a project he'd begun shortly after learning of her pregnancy. I believe you, she said simply, taking his hand and placing it on her stomach, where one of the twins was kicking energetically. But no more secrets, Julian. Not ever. He gathered her in his arms, relief evident in every line of his body. "Never again," he promised, sealing the vow with a kiss that spoke of gratitude and renewed commitment. What neither realized was that Beatrice's visit had triggered something physiological in Lila, stress hormones flooding her system, affecting the already high-risk twin pregnancy. That afternoon, sharp pain sent them rushing to the hospital, fear replacing the tenuous peace they'd just established. "Placental abruption," the doctor explained grimly after examining Lila. "Not severe yet, but concerning. The stress you mentioned likely contributed." Julian went pale, gripping Lila's hand as the doctor continued. "We need to monitor you closely. Complete bed rest from now on. If it worsens, we may need to deliver early." As the gravity of the situation settled over them, Lila saw something change in Julian's expression. Steely determination, replacing fear. "Whatever she needs," he told the doctor. "Whatever it takes to keep her and our daughters safe." Later, as Lila rested in the hospital bed they'd keep her in overnight for observation, Julian sat beside her, their hands interlaced. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "This is my fault, my past, my secrets." "No," Lila corrected gently. "It's Beatrice's doing, not yours." His expression hardened momentarily. "She won't come near you again. I've already made arrangements." Lila sensed there was more he wasn't saying. Some plan to address Beatrice's interference permanently, but in that moment, she was grateful for his protective instinct. "We'll get through this," she assured him, guiding his hand to where one of the twins was moving. "All four of us." The determination in Julian's eyes softened as he felt the movement beneath his palm. "Yes," he agreed. "Family protects its own." As he bent to kiss her tenderly, Lila realized that despite Beatrice's attempt to destroy their happiness, she had inadvertently strengthened it, forcing final truths into the open, allowing them to move forward with complete honesty. What began as poison seeds planted by a bitter woman had instead produced something unexpected, deeper roots for the love growing between them and a fiercer commitment to the family they were creating. Chapter 9. Storm and Shelter. The weeks following Lila's hospitalization transformed their lives completely. Their spacious bedroom became a medical space, with monitoring equipment installed and a nurse practitioner always on call. Julian moved his office into the adjoining room, conducting business from a makeshift desk where he could hear Lila if she needed him. By early September, reaching 28 weeks with the twins still safely growing, but Lila's condition increasingly precarious, they decided not to wait for their planned winter wedding. The ceremony that took place was unlike anything they'd planned. Instead of the botanical garden with its carefully selected flowers and invited guests, their vows were exchanged in their bedroom, with only the officiant, doctor, and 2 witnesses present. Though not the celebration they'd envisioned, their bedroom wedding held an intimacy no elaborate event could match. As Lila repeated her vows in a voice still weakened from bed rest, Julian's eyes never left hers, his usually steady hands trembling slightly as he placed the ring on her finger. The emotion in the room was palpable, intensified by the circumstances that had accelerated their timeline. Lila wore a silk nightgown rather than the custom gown hanging unworn in her closet, but her radiance as Julian slipped the wedding band beside her engagement ring made the setting irrelevant. "Not exactly the wedding of your dreams," Julian murmured after the others had left, lying carefully beside her on the bed, mindful of the monitoring equipment. "You're wrong," Lila countered, her hand finding his. "You're here. Our daughters are safe. That's everything I dreamed of." His kiss was tender, restrained by necessity, but filled with promise for the future. "Mrs. Hart," he whispered against her lips. She smiled, still getting used to the name. "It sounds right, doesn't it?" Their honeymoon consisted of quiet days together in their room, Julian reading aloud from books on parenting, Lila directing photography projects remotely when she felt strong enough. Despite the medical concerns shadowing them, these weeks held a peaceful intimacy neither had expected. Through it all, Julian's devotion never wavered. He attended every medical appointment, learned to interpret monitoring data with an expert's eye, and spent hours simply holding Lila's hand while she slept, as if his touch alone could protect her. "You should get some real rest," she urged one night, waking to find him still beside her, dark circles beneath his eyes, in a proper bed. "I am in a proper bed," he countered, his smile tired but genuine, "with my wife." The words still thrilled her. "Your very pregnant, very bedridden wife who's worried about you. When was the last time you slept more than 2 hours?" He shrugged. unwilling to admit the truth, that he was afraid to leave her, terrified of what might happen in his absence. Since Beatrice's visit and the subsequent complications, a new vulnerability had emerged in him, a raw fear unlike anything he'd shown before. That night, after Lila had fallen back asleep, Julian carefully untangled himself from her and moved to the window, staring out at the city lights. His hand went instinctively to the pocket, where he now carried a small ultrasound image of their daughters, perfect profiles captured in black and white, already showing distinct features despite their shared womb. "I can't lose them," he whispered to the darkness. "I can't lose her." The admission voiced his deepest fear, that having finally found true love and the family he'd longed for, it might all be taken away. The medical risks were real. The doctors had been brutally honest. With twins and Lila's condition, the next few weeks would be critical. A soft sound from the bed drew his attention. Lila was stirring, her face contorted in discomfort. Immediately, he was beside her, alert to any sign of trouble. "Just Braxton Hicks," she murmured, recognizing his concern. False alarm. Relief washed over him, but the momentary fear had been enough to crystallize something in his mind. Taking her hand, he made a decision. "If it comes to a choice," he said, his voice low and intense, "if the doctors ever have to choose between you and the babies, don't." Lila interrupted, not wanting to face this possibility. "No, I need to say this." His grip on her hand tightened. "I choose you, Lila, every time, without hesitation. I choose you." Tears welled in her eyes at the declaration, so different from the man who had once valued her primarily for the child she might give him. "You don't mean that?" "After wanting children for 28 years, I mean it with absolute certainty," he insisted. "These past months have taught me what really matters. I love our daughters already, more than I thought possible, but you, Lila," his voice caught, "you're my heart. There's no life for me without you in it." The raw honesty in his eyes left no room for doubt. This wasn't the desperate man who had propositioned her in the observatory, but a husband who had discovered that love, true, soul, deep love, transcended even his lifelong dream of fatherhood. Lila pulled him down for a gentle kiss, tasting the salt of tears, his or hers. She couldn't tell. "It won't come to that," she whispered against his lips. "We're all going to be fine." Despite her brave words, the very next day brought a new crisis. What began as routine monitoring revealed dangerously elevated blood pressure and signs of preeclampsia. The doctor arrived within the hour, his expression grave after examining Lila. "The twins are showing signs of distress," he explained, "and your condition is deteriorating rapidly. We need to deliver now." Fear clutched at Lila's heart. "But it's too early. They're only at 30 weeks. Their lung development looks good on the scans," the doctor assured her, "and they'll receive steroids immediately to help. But we can't wait any longer without risking all three of you." As preparations were made to transport her to the hospital, Lila watched Julian speaking urgently on the phone, arranging for specialists to be waiting, ensuring the best NICU unit was prepared. His efficiency in crisis was remarkable. Every detail anticipated, every contingency planned for. "I'm scared," she admitted when he returned to her side, as paramedics transferred her to a stretcher. Julian took her hand, his touch steady despite the fear evident in his eyes. "I'm right here with you, every step of the way." At the hospital, events moved with dizzying speed. Lila was prepped for an emergency C-section, while Julian was briefed on what to expect, the NICU protocols, potential complications for premature twins, the lengthy recovery ahead. "Mr. Hart," the surgeon said just before Lila was wheeled into the operating room, "I need to prepare you. With her condition, there are significant risks during surgery." Julian nodded, his face calm though his heart thundered. "Save her," he said simply. "Whatever happens, save my wife." The operating room was unexpectedly cold, the harsh lighting creating stark shadows across the faces of the medical team as they worked with urgent precision. Julian held Lila's hand tightly as the anesthesiologist administered the spinal block. Behind his surgical mask, he whispered encouragement and love, his eyes never leaving hers as doctors worked urgently on the other side of the blue drape. "They're prepping for the first incision," the anesthesiologist explained gently. "You'll feel pressure but no pain." Lila nodded, squeezing Julian's hand as the strange sensation of pressure without pain began. The sounds of the operating room, the metallic clink of instruments, the murmured communication between surgical team members, the steady beep of monitors, created a surreal backdrop to the most important moment of their lives. "I feel strange," Lila murmured, her words slightly slurred. "Something's wrong." The monitors confirmed her instinct, alarms suddenly blaring as her blood pressure plummeted. The medical team moved with practiced urgency, voices sharp with commands, as Lila's consciousness began to fade. "She's hemorrhaging," the surgeon called. "Get him out of here." "No." Julian refused to release Lila's hand, even as a nurse tried to usher him away. "I promised I'd stay with her." The last thing Lila saw before darkness claimed her was Julian's face, stripped of all pretense, raw with love and terror as he was finally pulled from her side. Hours later, she woke in recovery, disoriented and groggy. The first sensation was absence, her belly no longer swollen with the twins she'd carried for months. Then came awareness of pain, deeper and more intense than anything she'd experienced with the endometriosis surgery, even through the heavy medication. She could feel the raw tenderness where they had cut her to bring her daughters into the world. Panic surged through her until she felt a familiar hand grasping hers. "They're alive," Julian said immediately, understanding her first concern. Both of them, small but fighting. His voice broke slightly, just like their mother. Tears of relief streamed down Lila's face. "You've seen them?" He nodded, producing his phone to show her photographs of two tiny infants in NICU incubators. Impossibly small but perfect. "Ava and Elise," he said, using the names they'd chosen months earlier. 4 pounds each. "The doctors are cautiously optimistic." "And me?" she asked, becoming aware of pain radiating through her body, of tubes and monitors surrounding her. Julian's expression tightened. "You gave us all a scare," he admitted, his voice rough. "Lost a lot of blood. He swallowed hard. "They almost lost you on the table." The gravity of how close she'd come to death washed over Lila. "But I'm still here." "Yes." He pressed his forehead to their joined hands, emotion overwhelming him. "You're still here." Recovery was slow and painful. For the first week, Lila was too weak to visit the NICU, a separation that tore at her heart. Julian became her connection to their daughters, recording videos of each small milestone, bringing back reports from the specialists, keeping a constant bridge between mother and babies. When she was finally wheeled to see them, the emotion was overwhelming. Tiny hands reaching through incubator openings, miniature faces bearing unmistakable resemblances to both parents. Ava with Julian's sharp cheekbones already evident, Elise with Lila's delicate nose. "They're so beautiful," she whispered, tears flowing freely as she reached through the opening to touch Ava's perfect hand. Julian stood behind her wheelchair, one hand on her shoulder, the other gently touching Elise's incubator. "They're fighters," he said proudly. "Just like you." Over the following weeks, Lila regained strength slowly as the twins gradually thrived. Julian's devotion during this time was absolute, dividing himself between hospital visits with the girls and caring for Lila at home, all while managing his business remotely. Late one night, as Lila drowsed in their bedroom after a long day at the NICU, she woke to find Julian sitting beside the window, something in his hands. Drawing closer, she saw he was holding her camera, and reviewing photographs he'd taken. "What are you doing?" she asked softly, curious rather than accusatory. He looked up, a vulnerability in his expression that still surprised her after all they'd shared. "Learning to see the way you taught me." He turned the camera to show her the images, not technically perfect photographs, but capturing something profoundly moving. Her sleeping face, peaceful despite the ordeal she'd endured. Her hands, gentle on the incubators housing their daughters, the contrast of her olive skin against the hospital's sterile whiteness. "During the surgery," he said, his voice low, "when I thought I might lose you, I realized I'd never truly captured you the way you deserve, the way you've captured so much beauty for others." Tears welled in Lila's eyes as she looked at the photographs, seeing herself through his loving gaze, her beauty not diminished, but somehow enhanced by the vulnerability of recovery. "These are beautiful," she whispered, genuinely moved. "You've been paying attention to my lessons." Julian set the camera aside and drew her carefully into his arms, mindful of her still healing body. "I pay attention to everything about you," he murmured against her hair. "You're the most precious thing in my world." As she rested against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart, Lila reflected on their journey from that first night in his garden to this moment. Parents to twin daughters fighting for life in the NICU. What had begun as his desperate proposition had transformed into something neither could have imagined. A love powerful enough to withstand medical crises, family secrets, and the overwhelming fear of loss. The storm that had threatened to destroy them had instead revealed the true strength of their shelter in each other. Chapter 10. Fortune's Whisper. After 6 long weeks in the NICU, spanning through October and into November, the day finally arrived to bring Ava and Elise home. Julian had prepared their nursery with everything the premature twins might need, consulting specialists and hiring experienced night nurses to support Lila as she continued recovering. The journey home was surreal, Julian driving cautiously, Lila seated between the 2 infant carriers, unable to take her eyes off their tiny, perfect faces. Both girls had gained weight steadily, now nearly 7 pounds each. At home, Everett greeted them with uncharacteristic tenderness. "Welcome home, little mistresses. We've been waiting for you." Upstairs, the nursery had been transformed, with hand-painted murals of night-blooming flowers and a large photograph of their intertwined hands from the night Julian first told Lila he loved her. Each crib held a handcrafted botanical mobile featuring miniature versions of rare night-blooming species. That first evening as a family held quiet magic. "I spent 28 years imagining this moment," Julian said, as they watched their daughters sleep, "but nothing I imagined comes close to this reality." The following months brought one milestone after another. The twins' first smiles in February, recognizing each other in April, sitting up by June. Their first words came in September, Ava's Data, followed by Elise's Mama. Their first steps transformed the Hart household into a playground of discovery. 1 month after bringing the twins home, Lila discovered Julian working late at night on designs for an elaborate garden featuring every night-blooming species they'd photographed together. "I wanted to create something permanent to mark what we found together, what bloomed between us in darkness," he explained. By spring, the garden was ready. On a perfect May evening, Julian led Lila along a winding path to the previously unused eastern portion of the estate. "Close your eyes," he instructed as they reached a wrought iron gate entwined with night-blooming jasmine. Opening her eyes, Lila gasped. Before her stretched a garden illuminated by subtle lighting that mimicked moonlight, filled with night-blooming flowers arranged around a central clearing where a breathtaking sculpture stood. 2 pairs of hands, larger ones cradled protectively around smaller ones, all intertwined around twin flower buds beginning to open. At the base was inscribed, "True fortune whispers in the dark." "Do you understand what it means?" Julian asked softly. "That real treasure isn't found in daylight or obvious places, that the most precious things reveal themselves only in darkness when most aren't watching." "Yes," he confirmed, "like rare flowers, like love that comes unexpectedly, like the strength we found when everything seemed darkest." By the twins' second birthday, the night garden had matured beautifully, its paths now familiar to tiny feet racing under watchful eyes. Ava and Elise, sturdy toddlers with boundless energy, bore no trace of their fragile beginnings. That evening, as Julian helped the girls water a new planting, a birthday tradition, Lila captured the moment with her camera. Later, after the girls were asleep, she joined Julian in the night garden. "I saw Dr. Moreau today," Lila said. "You were right to insist on the checkup." Tension flickered across his face. Taking his hand, she placed it on her stomach. "There's someone new growing in there." Joy transformed Julian's features. "Another miracle?" he whispered, pulling her close. "Are you happy?" she asked. "3 children is more than you bargained for with that original proposition." Julian laughed. "That proposition was made by a fool who had no idea what real fortune looked like. This you, our daughters, this new life is wealth beyond anything I imagined." As night jasmine perfumed the air and stars glittered overhead, they embraced in the garden that symbolized their extraordinary journey from strangers to soulmates. Their true fortune whispered into existence during their darkest hours, and now bloomed gloriously in the light.